If you're drawn to the darkest corners of true crime, smash subscribe, leave a comment, and brace yourself, because what happened inside these walls was never meant to be seen. The sirens cut through the cold New South Wales night as floodlights snapped on, bleaching the sandstone walls of Goulburn Prison into something harsh and unforgiving. Guards ran, boots hammering concrete, radios screaming over one another. In the exercise yard, beneath razor wire and watchtowers, a body lay twisted near the perimeter wall, face down, wrists raw and red, as if he'd fought the ground itself. No one had heard a scream. No one had seen him fall. In a prison built to contain violence, something had slipped past every barrier. Detective Senior Constable Aaron Pike arrived minutes later, the smell of damp stone and disinfectant hitting him before he reached the yard. Goulburn wasn't just another maximum security facility. It was Australia's oldest. A place designed in an era when isolation was considered discipline and sunlight a privilege. Pike knew its reputation: riots that shook the state, hunger strikes buried in old reports, men locked in cells so long they forgot the sound of their own voices. Tonight, the prison felt like it was holding its breath. The dead man was identified quickly: Daniel Mercer, 43, serving a life sentence with no parole. He'd spent nearly 2 decades in long-term segregation. His cell was one of the oldest wings, a narrow concrete box with a slit for light and a door thick enough to mute time itself. Officially, Mercer was a model inmate. No recent write-ups. No enemies listed. Yet the marks on his wrists suggested restraints, not a fall. And the position of his body didn't match any accident Pike had ever seen. Governor Helen Ward met Pike near the gate, her expression tight, controlled. She'd run Goulburn for 5 years and knew how quickly a death could ignite unrest. "We've locked the wings," she said. "No movement. If this turns into another riot—" "It already is," Pike replied, eyes fixed on the yard. "You just don't hear it yet." As the forensic team worked, Pike walked the perimeter. The prison's design loomed over him: corridors that dead-ended without warning, stairwells that swallowed sound, blind corners where cameras didn't quite reach. Goulburn had been built to dominate the men inside it. Over time, that dominance had curdled into something else. Violence didn't just happen here, it incubated. Inside Mercer's cell, Pike found the first anomaly. Scratched into the concrete wall, barely visible beneath layers of paint, were tally marks, hundreds of them, grouped in uneven clusters. Not days. Not weeks. Something longer. On the floor lay a folded piece of paper, hidden beneath the bed frame. It wasn't contraband. It was a copy of an old inspection report from the 1970s, yellowed and annotated in tight handwriting. Certain lines were circled: lack of natural light, psychological deterioration, design contributing to aggression. Pike felt a chill. Someone had given Mercer this document. Someone inside the system. He pulled Mercer's file next. Transfers between units. Months in isolation. Requests for medical evaluations that went unanswered. Then a note from 3 weeks earlier. Inmate requests meeting with external investigator. Claims knowledge of historic misconduct. The request had been denied. By dawn, rumors were already moving through the cell blocks. Whispers of a cover-up. Of men who disappeared into segregation and came out broken, or didn't come out at all. Pike stood in the governor's office as a junior officer rushed in, pale and shaking. "Detective," the officer said, voice low. "You need to see this." We opened an unused service corridor behind the old isolation wing. Pike followed, heart pounding, down a passage that hadn't seen footsteps in decades. At the end was a sealed door, its lock rusted shut. When they forced it open, the beam of Pike's torch swept across the darkness and stopped. Inside were cells that didn't exist on any blueprint. And on one wall, written in the same tight handwriting as Mercer's notes, were the words that turned the case inside out. He was never the last. By midday, Goulburn Prison was sealed tighter than a crime scene buried in concrete. News helicopters circled overhead, their distant thrum echoing through the yards, while inside, tension rippled from cell to cell. Detective Aaron Pike stood in the shadowed service corridor, staring at the illegal cells like they were staring back at him. Each one was smaller than regulation, no windows, No cameras, no official record. Places where time didn't just pass, it disappeared. The prison administration moved fast. Too fast. Governor Ward insisted the corridor be classified as structurally unsafe, access restricted pending review. Pike knew the playbook. Delay. Contain. Let bureaucracy smother the truth. But Mercer's words, he was never the last, kept hammering in his head. If Mercer had been silenced, it wasn't for the past alone. It was because he was still a problem. Pike requested every segregation log dating back 30 years. What he got was incomplete. Gaps spanning months. Names missing. Some inmates listed as transferred had no receiving facility on record. Others were marked deceased with causes that felt deliberately vague: medical complication, self-harm, incident during restraint. Pike cross-checked the names against coronial records. Several didn't exist. One name did. Michael Kersey. Incarcerated 1994. Known agitator. Filed repeated complaints about prolonged isolation and sensory deprivation. Last official entry, transferred to another facility in 2002. But Pike found an internal memo buried deep in archived correspondence. Unsigned, stamped confidential. Kersey unsuitable for transfer. Recommend continued containment. Contained where? As Pike dug deeper, pressure mounted. His supervisor called, voice tight, advising caution. "This is a corrections matter," he said. "You're stepping on landmines." Pike ignored it. That afternoon, a prisoner in the old wing attempted suicide. Survived, barely. When Pike spoke to him in the infirmary, the man's eyes darted to the door every few seconds. "They moved him," the inmate whispered. "Mercer. He wasn't supposed to be out that night." "Moved by who?" Pike asked. The inmate swallowed. "The screws don't go there. Not after lights out. There's another way." That night, Pike returned to the illegal corridor with a forensic architect from Sydney, Dr. Lena Morales. She traced the layout, her face growing darker with every measurement. "These cells amplify sound deprivation," she said. "Angles designed to disorient. No natural airflow. Whoever built this understood psychological breakdown." "And whoever used it," Pike replied, "knew exactly what it would do." They found something else behind one of the false walls. A maintenance shaft large enough for a man to crawl through, leading directly to the exercise yard where Mercer's body was found. The route bypassed cameras entirely. Mercer hadn't wandered out. He'd been taken. As they documented the shaft, alarms blared across the prison. Lockdown. Over the radio came frantic voices, an officer missing during routine checks. Pike sprinted toward the isolation wing, boots sliding on polished concrete. In cell block D, they found blood smeared along a corridor wall, leading to a supply room. Inside, the officer lay bound but alive, shaking. He asked questions. The officer gasped. About the old cells. About names. "Who?" Pike demanded. But before the man could answer, a fire alarm shrieked from the opposite end of the prison. Smoke poured into the hallways. In the chaos, inmates screamed, doors rattled, and somewhere in the confusion, files vanished from the records office. Digital backups wiped clean. By the time order was restored, the message was clear. Someone inside Goulburn was actively erasing the past, and anyone who tried to uncover it. At dawn, Pike received an anonymous envelope slid under his hotel door. Inside was a single photograph, an emaciated man standing in one of the illegal cells, eyes hollow, holding a handwritten date. The date was 3 months ago. On the back, 4 words were written in black ink. "You're already too late." The photograph burned in Aaron Pike's hands as the sun rose over Goulburn. 3 months ago. That meant whoever had taken the picture had access long after Mercer's supposed routine confinement. It also meant at least one man was still alive inside a system that officially said he didn't exist. Pike knew then this wasn't just about a death. It was about an institution protecting itself by deciding who counted as human and who didn't. He went back inside with a warrant before anyone could stop him. Governor Ward protested, citing security risks, but Pike didn't slow down. With Dr. Morales and a small tactical unit, he moved through the old wing, past sealed doors and forgotten stairwells, toward the maintenance shaft. The prison felt different now, angrier. Like it knew what was coming. They followed the shaft deeper than before, emerging into a section of the prison not marked on any modern plan. The air was stale. Lights flickered weakly. Then they heard it, a sound so faint it could have been imagined. Scraping. A voice, hoarse and exhausted, calling for help. They found him in the last cell. Michael Kersey was barely recognizable as a man. His hair hung in mats, skin stretched tight over bone. He shielded his eyes from the torchlight, whispering like speech itself was dangerous. He'd been there for years, fed just enough to survive, punished with silence whenever he spoke too loudly. Mercer had been his only link to the outside world. A cleaner assigned to the wing who smuggled paper, old reports, proof. He said if I disappeared, Kersey murmured, people might finally look. Mercer hadn't disappeared. He'd been removed. As medics rushed Kersey out, Pike turned back toward the main corridor and froze. Governor Ward stood there, flanked by 2 senior corrections officers. Her face wasn't panicked. It was resolved. You don't understand, she said calmly. If this gets out, the riots will make the past look gentle. Men will die. Officers will die. They already have, Pike shot back. Ward's voice dropped. This prison was built to break men. That wasn't an accident. The statement. They signed off on it. If you expose this, you expose everyone. Behind her, one officer shifted nervously. Pike recognized him from old photos. He'd been on duty during the riots decades earlier. A survivor. Or a participant. You killed Mercer, Pike said. The officer didn't deny it. He was going to talk. Like the others. The standoff broke when external police flooded the wing, guns raised. Ward's control cracked then, just for a second. Enough. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Press. Suspensions. Emergency hearings. Goulburn dominated headlines across Australia and beyond. The illegal cells were photographed, documented, condemned. Kersey survived long enough to testify. His words were quiet, precise, devastating. But some things never made it into the reports. 3 weeks after the story broke, Pike sat alone in his office, reading the final internal review. It concluded the abuse was historical, the responsibility diffuse. No mention of how many inmates were unaccounted for. No explanation for missing files that were never recovered. That night, Pike received one last message. No sender. No return address. Just coordinates. He drove 2 hours into the countryside to an abandoned property once owned by Corrections Services. Beneath a collapsed shed, investigators later found unmarked graves. Fewer than Pike feared. More than the state admitted. Officially, the case closed. Goulburn Prison still stands. And sometimes, former inmates say, if the wind is right, you can hear knocking from walls that aren't on any map. If this story stayed with you, you already know. Some places don't let go. Subscribe because the next one goes even deeper.